you go to church?
What's that? Micah. Yeah, you want to go over to the book of Micah this morning.
How many minor prophets are there?
12? Is that right? I've never really. I think that's right. I don't know if I've ever really numbered them. I think there's 12. Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, I just want to thank Jesse for filling in. You did fill in for me last week. I hadn't even checked. He was assigned to cover the book of Zephaniah, and so I appreciate him doing that for me this past week. I think this morning we'll be able to take the time to spend the whole class period just studying the book of Micah this morning. I think I've outlined it all out. It's almost like there may be a few books that we're going to spend 2 Sundays on, but for the most part, we're going to be able to finish all the rest of the minor prophets between now and the end of February. So that's the plan anyway. All right, so this morning we are looking at Micah, and this is a wonderful book, one that after studying it myself and going through the text, I come away feeling so encouraged. It's an easy book to understand. It is a positive book. You know, a lot of times you read about the judgments that are coming upon God's people, and you can easily come away thinking, oh, all is hopeless. These people are going to, are just horrible. And there's no hope for God's people. And you think, is this worth my time to study this if it's going to be just all doom and gloom? Well, Micah gives us a little bit of a refreshment in the middle of all this. And really, I think you can spin it. I'm a positive fella anyway. And I think you can spin any and all of the prophets to see that there is positivity in all of them. Even though there's doom and gloom, there are still great blessings. And that's really what we find in this book, the Micah, the book of Micah, the prophet here. His whole message is one of how there's judgment now, but there's blessings that come later. And that's the way life is in general, isn't it? You've heard the phrase, no pain, no gain. You're going to have to go through some things in order for the blessings to come later on. You do the work now, we can play later. That's what I tell my kids all the time. Let's get this work done so we can play later. If we begin to play now, guess what's looming over us? Burdening us down. All the work that we need to get done. And so the idea here is with Micah, there's judgment now. You're going to have to face this now. But there is great blessings ahead of you. And that's the message that we should have even in our own lives as well. I'm going to kick this down just so it doesn't blow on me anymore. If you're too cold, just bundle up and cuddle with the person next to you. But yes, that is the message that we find here in the book of Micah. Judgment now and blessings later. Now, Micah prophesied during the time of 3 kings, the days of Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah of Judah. And what a blessing to read through this. It was about the same time period as the prophet Isaiah from 740, 700 BC Micah is right around that same time period of 735 to 700 BC. We can date that because we have the record of when those kings were ruling over Israel. And so you find the word of the Lord, verse 1, came to Micah of Morsheth in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Samaria and Jerusalem. Micah of Morsheth. The city of Morsheth is about 25 miles southwest of Jerusalem, on the borders between Judah and the Philistines, which means that Micah has something in common with the prophet Amos. Do you know what they may have in common? What do you think? Both of them were just simple country preachers that would go and preach to large cities. And so in the same way that Amos did so, Micah leaves his small little town of Morsheth and goes to preach in the metropolitan area of Jerusalem and Samaria. We really don't know a lot about Micah's background or how he was called to preach or anything like that. But we know that he took it serious and that he had a strong sense of his calling to go and do the work of the Lord. Chapter 3, verse 8, he says, on the other hand, I am filled with power, is what he says. That's Micah. Filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, and with justice and courage to make known to Jacob his rebellious acts, even to Israel his sin. So notice what he says there in chapter 3, verse 8. He says, I have this great boldness, this courage about me to be able to go and to preach and to make known the rebellious acts of Jacob and the sins of Israel. That's Micah. So the people that he's addressing, we find there in chapter 3, verse 8, but it begins there in chapter 1, verse 1 of Samaria and Jerusalem. Samaria is the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel, and Jerusalem is the capital city of the southern kingdom of Judah. This is the time of the divided kingdom. That's what we have to realize, that there are two kings, two capitals, one people. They're really supposed to be one people, but they've divided themselves in the midst of a civil war. And Micah says he is to preach to both cities, both kingdoms are to hear this kind of message from God. And Judah, during this time, King Ahaz was really very particularly an evil ruler of that time. And that is the time period that those prophets did their work. When evil reigned and wickedness was just rampant all over. So let's look and talk a little bit more. I guess I forgot. Oh, I was going to tell you the name Micah. His name is a question. Can you imagine your name being a question? Who is like Jehovah? What a great question for us to consider. Who is like Jehovah? Well, the answer is what? No one. It's a comparative question. We look at that question and we think, if you were to weigh out the scales to see who God is, compared to anybody or any other God, there's no one like him. He's sovereign. He's all-powerful, all-knowing. There is no one like him. Who's like him? No one. And that is what Micah's name means. I mentioned this. He's from Morsheth. Gath is another way of it's like you've got your zip 5 and zip 4 of your post office, at the zip code. It gives you a little bit more details of where he's from. Man of the fields. Yes, Bill.
In a sense, we're all like Jehovah in that we were created in his image.
Sure, yeah.
We messed up.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So no one hits the standard that God has set, right? And that's a good message that Micah brings out to the people. They are the ones that have sinned. They've transgressed. They've trespassed against the standards by which God has set. All right. Let's look at chapters 1 and 2 together. Chapters 1 and 2 together. Let's read chapter 1, 16 verses. Y'all ready? We've already read verse 1. Let's start verse 2. Hear, O peoples, all of you. Listen, O earth, and all it contains. And let the Lord God be a witness against you. The Lord from his holy temple. For behold, the Lord is coming forth from his place. He will come down and tread on the high places of the earth. The mountains will melt under him, and the valleys will be split like wax before the fire, like water poured down a steep place. All of this is for the rebellion of Jacob and for the sins of the house of Israel. What is the rebellion of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? What is the high place of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem? For I will make Samaria a heap of ruins in the open country, planting places for a vineyard. I will pour her stones down into the valley and will lay bare her foundations. All of her idols will be smashed. All of her earnings will be burned with fire. All of her images I will make desolate. For she collected them from a harlot's earnings. That sounds familiar from Hosea that we studied not that long ago. And to the earnings of a harlot they will return. Because of this, I must lament and wail. I must go barefoot and naked. I must make a lament like the jackals and a mourning like the ostriches. For her wound is incurable. For it has come to Judah and it has reached the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. Tell it not in Gath. Weep not at all at Beth El Apharah. I practiced that, folks. Roll yourself in the dust. Go on your way, inhabitant of Shaphir, in shameful nakedness. And the inhabitant of Zanan does not escape. The lamentation of Beth Ezel will take from you its support. From the inhabitant of Maroth becomes weak, waiting for the Lord. Good, because a calamity. I'm sorry, my text here jumped on me. Because weak, waiting for good. Because a calamity has come down from the Lord to the gate of Jerusalem. Harness the chariot to the team of horses, O inhabitant of Lachish. She was the beginning of sin. To the daughter of Zion, because you were found, the rebellious acts of Israel. Therefore you will give parting gifts on behalf of Morsheth Gath. The houses of Achzib will become a deception to the kings of Israel. Moreover, I will bring on you the one who takes possession, O inhabitant of Mershath. The glory of Israel will enter Adullam. Make yourself bald and cut off your hair because of the children of your delight. Extend your baldness like the eagle, for they will go from you into exile. So this whole chapter here is all about this judgment. I told you, it begins with judgment, and then we will see the blessings that come. Notice how point blank he is here in chapter 1 and starting in verse 5. All this is for the rebellion of Jacob. and for the sins of the house of Israel. It's not a guessing game of why this judgment is coming upon them. They're not having to figure out what have we done wrong. Do your children ever do this? Have you heard kids say, what do we do? Have you seen in basketball games when somebody is fouled, what do they go? What do they do? Palms up, right? Right? There's no doubt about it. They should know they're guilty. This is the reason that this judgment is coming upon them. There is rebellion and there is sin. Rebellion of the house of Jacob and sins in the house of Israel. Really, it makes no difference. Whether you are in Jerusalem or you are in Samaria, you are guilty. And see, the people in Jerusalem may look at the people in Samaria and think, wow, look how horrible these people are. Don't they know where they should worship? Don't they know that they need to come to Jerusalem to do this? We are so much better than they are because we've got it all figured out. We are Jerusalem. No, they're just as guilty. Just as guilty.
That sounds a little familiar.
Yeah, I know. I'm really good at pointing fingers at everybody else and thinking about how good I am. Well, that's what they're guilty of. They're guilty of always rebelling against the Lord. And it doesn't matter where you're from, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's the judgment that's pronounced on both Israel and Judah. And there is a reason for that. Now, he goes into more details in chapter 2. Let's read the text. Verses 1 through 5. Let's read that first. It says, woe to those who scheme iniquity, who work out evil on their beds. When morning comes, they do it, for it is in the power of their hands. They covet fields and then seize them, and houses and take them away. They rob a man in his house, a man in his inheritance. Therefore, thus says the Lord, behold, I am planning against this family a calamity, from which you cannot remove your necks. And you will not walk haughtily, for it will be an evil time. On that day they will take up against you a taunt and utter a bitter lamentation and say, we are completely destroyed. He exchanges the portion of my people, how he removes it from me. To the apostate he apportions our field. Therefore you will have no one stretching a measuring line for you by a lot in the assembly of the Lord. In verses 1 through 5, their biggest sin is this arrogance and this violence that they're willing to carry out. Did you see this? They work it out in their beds before they even get up in the morning. They plan out. Here's what we will do. We will take advantage of people. We will be violent towards them. It's in the power of the hands. And I love this right here. They wake up in the morning. They figure it all out in their bed. And when that morning comes, they do it. They don't just think about it. They actually do these things. It's there in the power of their hands. They're able to do it. And so what do? They see these fields that they want to just steal or take from somebody, and they go and take it. Houses, they grab it. They rob a man and his house, the man and his inheritance. They just take and they take and they take. And they're oppressors is who they are. And because of that, this judgment comes upon them. It's violent. Notice what he says. This calamity that's coming upon them, you're not going to be able to remove your neck. You think, okay, maybe I could save, you've heard, save your own neck, or I'm risking my own neck here. Well, you're not going to be able to get your neck out of this situation. It's definitely coming, and it's going to come hard on them. He says it will be an evil time. I don't necessarily like the translation there. I can understand it. It's an evil time. It's an evil time because of sin, but the judgment is not evil. What God is doing is not evil towards them. It is difficult. It is discipline. Not necessarily evil, but what they're doing is evil, and the judgment is equal to what they deserve. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about those first 5 verses. All right, let's look at verses 6 through 11. He says, "Do not speak out," so they speak out. "But if they do not speak out concerning these things, reproaches will not be turned back. Is it being said, O house of Jacob, is the Spirit of the Lord impatient? Are these his doings? Do not my words do good to the one walking uprightly? Recently my people have arisen as an enemy. You strip the robe off the garment from unsuspecting passers-by, from those returned from war. The women of my people you evict, each one from her pleasant house. From her children you take my splendor forever. Arise and go, for this is no place to rest, because of the uncleanliness that brings on destruction, a painful destruction. If a man walking after wind and falsehood had told lies and said, I will speak out to you concerning wine and liquor, he would be a spokesman to this people. And so here, the people have rejected the prophets and accept these false teachings that you can live however you want to live. He says, now my words, they do good for people. And you're not willing to listen to these things. You just go about, you do all these evil things constantly. And because of that, this judgment is coming upon them. But that's not all bad. You deal with the judgment. And what's the theme? Blessings come later. Blessings come later. Verse 12. He says, I will surely assemble all of you, Jacob. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together like sheep in the fold, like a flock in the midst of its pasture. They will be noisy with men. Their breaker goes up before them. They break out, pass through the gate, and go out by it. So their king goes on before them, and the Lord at their head. Restoration is promised to them. It's not always going to be absolutely horrible. There is hope for them in that there will be a time that he can assemble all of you, Jacob. Now, when the Bible says all, sometimes it means all. And sometimes it means all those who are faithful. That's what this means here. Notice what the next line says. Surely gather the remnant of Israel. Just the small amount that's left. So he says, I will gather them all of the small amount that's faithful to the Lord. And I will put them together in this beautiful pasture where they can live and they can be free. They can break out and go before them, pass through the gate. They can come and go, and their king goes before them. Why are they so safe and secure in this pasture? Not because of a shepherd. Notice what he says. It's a king that's taking care of them. Now, kings typically are not found in the pasture taking care of sheep. Now, David was. David began as a shepherd and then became a king. Here he's talking about this king that is a shepherd. The Lord is at their head. Who is this shepherd king who is able to gather all the people of God together, those who are faithful? Who is that?
The Lord.
It's the Lord Jesus Christ. It's the good shepherd. The good shepherd. The great shepherd, right? The one who has the ability to assemble everyone together as one people, whether they be in historical Israel or in the modern day church. He can put them all together and take care of them. The judgment's coming, but there's restoration ahead. Restoration ahead for the people here that Micah's preaching to, and it's happening right now. So you have in the Old Testament, you have a fulfillment of a prophecy right there in the moment. And then you'll have fulfillment in the prophecy that comes later. And sometimes you'll have even fulfillment that's even more later than where we're at. This is a fulfillment of the prophecy in that time when the people of Israel do unite back together. But then it's also pointing towards, I believe, a time when all of God's people can be assembled together in the church. Both Jews and Greeks, all are welcome. We go into all the world and preach the gospel to everyone. And everybody can be a part of this. That's the true restoration that comes. And we look at it as well as a time when we all will be together. All assembled together before the throne of God. Whether Jew or Greek or whoever we are. For all time, God's people stands there before them. There is a picture of this, I think, in the book of Revelation, where we have the 144,000 divided up into 12 groups of 12,000. And I think that is a representation of God's people, Israel, being gathered together before God. And then in the same context, you have this great multitude that's not numbered. And I think it's not numbered on purpose, because yet we are still yet in that number, gathering more people into that great number right now, looking for people to join us as God's people. It's everybody. Whether you are in the historical Israel or in the modern day church, restoration is available to you. It's through the King Shepherd who is at the head of this flock. All right. Any questions or comments? We're going to look at chapter 3 here. Anything at all?
This is a prime example of God giving His people what they justly deserve.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, He is a loving God, which in today's world they have swung that pendulum too far.
Sure.
That He's not only a loving God, He's also a just God too.
Yeah. And that's what I love about Micah, is it shows both sides of Him. Okay, now let's look at chapter 3 through 5. I don't think I've got time to read every bit of it, but I'm going to point out just a few things for us. First of all, in chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, we have how God is condemning Israel's civil leaders. These are the ones, notice what he says, the rulers of the house, excuse me, the rulers of the house of Israel, is it not for you to know justice? You who hate good and love evil, who tear off their skin from them and their flesh from their bones, who eat the flesh of my people, strip off their skin from them, break their bones and chop them up as for the pot, as a meat in a kettle. Isn't that disgusting? We're having stew at my house later on, if anybody's welcome. That's the idea here, though, is they are the heads of Jacob. This is the civil leaders. Now, I point this out because the way you can categorize this is a little bit different. When you get to verse 5, notice what he says here. Thus says the Lord concerning the prophets who lead my people astray. Here you have the religious leaders who have led them away. Notice what they say. When they have something to bite with their teeth, they cry peace. In other words, you've got the opportunity to really preach and to teach people the truth and correct them. But instead, they preach peace. But against him who puts nothing in their mouths, they declare holy war. Therefore, it will be night for you without vision. You can't see anything. Darkness for you without divination. The sun will go down on the prophets, and the day will become dark over them. Their problem is that even the prophets are going to be condemned by God. They're not immune to it at all. Now, look at verse 9 through 12, because here's another division here. Notice what he says here. Now hear this, heads of the house of Jacob and rulers of the house of Israel. Now you've got more like your household leaders, your dads and your husbands who rule their homes. So no one is immune to this. It's a leadership problem that Micah is preaching against. And it's not just the government, civil leaders, that's the problem. It's not just religious leaders, that's the problem. And it's not just the dads and the husbands who are not leading their families the way that they should. Every aspect of leadership is addressed here because they're all in rebellion, and God condemns them for their work, their evil work. But notice what he says, heads of Jacob, rulers of the house. So we got the phrase rulers, and then you have prophets who lead, and then verse 9, heads of the house of Jacob. So that's kind of an interesting way of dividing all of that out. Notice what it says, the rulers of the house of Israel who abhor justice and twist everything that is straight. You would think if it's all in order, then you leave it alone. We say this, if it ain't broke,
Don't fix it.
they're taking something that's not broken and they're breaking it. They're taking it, it's straight, it's perfect, and they twist it and manipulate it. And that's the problem that they have.
And they do it for money.
Yeah, they do it for money. They do it for their own
Prophets
gain.
and
Yes.
the priests.
Yep, that's exactly right. Notice what verse 11 says. Her leaders, pronounce, her priests, her prophets, divine for money is what she was saying. That's verse 11, yeah. Yet they lean on the Lord, saying, is not the Lord in our midst? Look, God, look how good it is. God's got to be here because, the way things are, but they're not. It's just tricking everybody. All right. Any questions about chapter 3? I told you we were going to get through that pretty quick. Look at chapter 4. Chapter 4, glory to come in the later. Remember our theme, right? Judgment, punishment, discipline, but then blessings later on. So chapter 4 gives us the blessings. Notice what he says. It'll come about in the last days. Oh, good. The last days. That the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and the peoples will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us about his ways and that we may walk in his paths. For from Zion will go forth the law, even the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, and he will judge between many peoples and render decisions for mighty distant nations. It's interesting to see here that this message, this law, is not just for Jerusalem. It starts in Jerusalem, and that's the principle that we find in the fulfillment of this. When Jesus commissions his disciples, where does he say to start? Right there in Jerusalem. Acts chapter 1 and verse 8, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the uttermost parts of the world. And when you read through the book of Acts, you see that progression come about. Starts there in Jerusalem and then to the uttermost parts of the world. This law, this word from Jerusalem will go to many peoples. Distant nations will hear all of this message. So, chapter 4, verses 1 through 8, glory is coming in those later days. Notice what he says, verse 6. In that day, declares the Lord, I will assemble the lame and gather the outcast, even those whom I have afflicted. I will make the lame a remnant, and the outcast a strong nation. What nation is this, you ask? It's the church. It's the church. That's the ultimate fulfillment. That strong nation is the church. Let's see. Notice what it says. How do I know this? Notice what he says. Verse 8. As for you, tower of the flock, hill of the daughter of Zion, to you it will come, even the former dominion will come, the kingdom of the daughter of Jerusalem. This is talking about the church. All right, verses 9 of chapter 4 all the way to chapter 5, verse 1 is a whole section that talks about the distress and the captivity right before the restoration. It's just a horrible time again. Verse 10 says, writhe and labor to give birth, daughter of Zion, like a woman in childbirth. For now you will go out of the city, dwell in the field, and go to Babylon. There you will be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you from the hand of your enemies. And now many nations have been assembled against you, who say, let her be polluted. Let our eyes gloat over Zion. But they do not know the thoughts of the Lord. They don't know. They don't see the big picture. They do not understand his purpose. For he has gathered them like sheaves to the threshing floor. Verse 1 of chapter 5, now muster yourselves in troops, daughters of troops, that they have laid siege against us. With a rod they will smite the judge of Israel on the cheek. But then verse 2 starts a kind of a new section here. You know, sometimes our Bible's divided. It's divided kind of weird. But chapter 5, verse 2 is all about this coming Messiah. But as for you, Bethlehem, Ephraim, too little bit to be among the clans of Judah, from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago and from the days of eternity. When is eternity? Is it just in the past? No. It's in the future as well, right? It's forever. So when did he begin? There was no beginning for this one. It's forever. And so this idea is that this Messiah is coming. He's coming, and he's got restoration in mind. Verse 3, therefore he will give them up until the time when she who is in labor has borne a child. Then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel, and he will arise and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord, his God. They will remain, because at that time he will be great to the ends of the earth. This one will be our peace. When the Assyrian invades our land, when he tramples on our citadels, then we will rise against him, 7 shepherds and 8 leaders of men. All right, chapter 5 through the rest of the chapter, all the way to verse 15, is about more judgment upon Israel and her enemies. So not just Israel is going to be punished, but anybody that is an enemy of Israel. He says this in verse 9. He says, your hand will be lifted up against your adversaries, and all your enemies will be cut off. It will be in that day, declares the Lord, that I will cut off your horses from among you and destroy your chariots, and cut off the cities and of your land, tear down the fortifications, cut off the sorceries from your land, and you will have fortune tellers no more. Cut off the carved images, the sacred pillars, no longer. I will root out your Assyrian from among you and destroy your cities. I will execute vengeance and anger and wrath on the nations which have not obeyed. All right, let's look at, I got like probably 3 minutes maybe. It seems it rang a little early. Did it?
No.
It didn't? Really? That thing says I've got 4 minutes. My watch says I've got 4 minutes.
You got 3.
Three?
You got 3.
Well, don't get up early, Dad, or I'm counting you absent. All right. Chapter 6 and chapter 7, God has this complaint against them. He has an indictment upon those people. Listen, you mountains, to the indictment of the Lord, chapter 6, verse 2. And you enduring foundations of the earth, because the Lord has a case against his people. Even with Israel, he will dispute. My people, what have I done to you? And now I have wearied you. Answer me. Give me some kind of a clue of what you're thinking, how you feel about this. I brought you out of the land of Egypt and ransomed you from the house of slavery. I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, 2 brothers and a sister, right? My people, remember now what Balak, king of Moab, counseled, and what Balaam, son of Beor, answered him, and from Shittim and Gilgal, so that you might know the righteous acts of the Lord. Verse 6, with what shall I come to the Lord and bow myself before the God on high? Shall I come to him with burnt offerings, with yearling calves? Does the Lord take delight in thousands of rams and 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I present my firstborn for my rebellious acts, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? The Lord has got some requirements for these people. He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? What does he want? Verse 8. Do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. If we could figure out those 3 things, then we've got it figured out. It's that simple, folks. That is the key verse, I think, in the book of Micah. What does the Lord really require of you? What does he want? You do justice, you love kindness, and you walk humbly before God. If we could figure that out in today's church today, modern times, then we would be able to be successful before the Lord. All right. Lessons learned from Micah. I'm going to give this to you real quick. We are to act justly and live righteously, be courageous and confront wicked leaders. We have to realize that God is sovereign and he is over all and is faithful in his promises. He will do what he says he'll do. And we are to walk humbly with God, no matter what. All right. Next week, I cannot remember exactly which one is next. I have to look at my notes. It may be Nahum. Yeah, it is. Nahum is next. Just turn the page and start reading that book there. It's just 3 chapters, I believe, is all it is. Yeah, chapter 1 through 3 for Nahum next week.